They say some items carry a history too heavy to forget, no matter how far they travel or how many hands they pass through. One of those is a hat. Just a simple, beautiful hat. Charcoal black with a silk ribbon and a curved brim, always spotless, always just your size. It shows up in pawn shops, vintage stores, flea markets, always cheap, always waiting, and always cursed. They say it once belonged to a man who wore it while doing unspeakable things. And now, whoever wears the hat eventually hears the same soft whisper behind their thoughts, a voice that doesn't belong to them. You'll see things, feel things. And when the whisper grows too loud to ignore, you'll either disappear completely, or they'll find you grinning in a hospital bed, whispering about the perfect fit. If that still sounds like just a story, let me show you what happens when the hat picks you. If you find comfort in the eerie calm of forgotten tales, give the video a gentle thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like. More soft steps through strange legends. Share where you are and the hour in the comments. It's always a comfort knowing who wanders into these stories with us. Now, let's begin tonight's quiet warning. Chapter 1. The hat appears. It's always somewhere different. Sometimes it's tucked between two broken umbrella stands in a dimly lit pawn shop. Sometimes it's resting atop a mannequin in a boutique that doesn't even sell men's clothing. One time, it was found in the lost and found bin of a Greyhound station with a tag that simply read, "Yours." The hat doesn't travel by normal means. No one ever remembers stocking it. No receipts trace its path. Ask the shopkeeper, and you'll get a shrug or a furrowed brow. "Been there a while, I guess," they'll say, or "Funny thing, I don't remember putting that out." But there it is. Charcoal black, silk ribbon, wide brim, always clean, always perfectly shaped, like it's waiting for someone. And it never gathers dust, never shows wear. Even in the oldest, dirtiest corners of a shop, it gleams, just enough to catch your eye. It doesn't look cursed. That's the trick. It looks right. Men pick it up without hesitation, try it on without thinking, and almost every time, it fits like it was made for them. A tailor's whisper of weight, snug but never tight. The kind of fit that makes you stand taller, breathe deeper, glance once more in the mirror. Not out of vanity, out of recognition. Because somehow, the hat doesn't just fit your head, it fits your life. A man named David found it in a thrift store in Flagstaff, tucked between a bowling ball bag and a VH's copy of The Red Shoes. He said he wasn't even looking for anything, just killing time. The moment he put it on, he felt different, taller, straighter. Like his spine remembered something it hadn't in years. He bought it for $2. The clerk swore it wasn't theirs. Later, David would say he didn't even like hats. But it fit so well. Another man, a mechanic from Des Moines, claimed it showed up in his back seat. He locked the doors himself. Hadn't picked up a hitchhiker. But there it was, sitting on the seat like a forgotten briefcase. He almost didn't touch it. But he did. Because you do. It calls to something quiet in you. Not loudly, not with a voice. Just a subtle nudge in the gut. A whisper between thoughts. You'll think, "I've always wanted one like this, even if you haven't." You'll say, "It's just a hat," even if something inside you is already wondering why your fingertips feel a little colder after touching it. It's always cheap. Too cheap. Never more than a few dollars. Never on a rack with other items. Just placed somewhere you're bound to find it. Alone, unassuming, and inevitable. Those who walk away from it often don't remember doing so. But those who try it on, they always remember the moment, not with fear, not even with unease. They remember the fit, and more than that, they remember how it made them feel, confident, capable, strong. Like a better version of themselves had been waiting just under the skin, and the hat had finally let him out. It's never immediate, it's never obvious. It starts with posture, with swagger, with something subtle shifting in how you move through the world. People look at you differently, and you like it. And that's where it begins. The stories all start here, with someone finding the hat, with someone telling themselves it's just a little bit of luck, just a perfect find. But the hat doesn't wait to be found. It finds you, and when it does, you won't feel cursed. Not yet. You'll feel chosen. Until the whispers start. A man named Ellis was the first in his town to wear it, or at least the first whose story made it into whispers. He'd been browsing an antique mall, the kind with aisles so narrow you have to hold your breath to pass through. A radio was playing something low and crackling. Jazz, maybe. His fingertips trailed across shelves of vintage postcards, rusted tools, old war medals. And then he saw it, perched on a vintage hat stand, tilted just enough to look casual, as though someone had just taken it off, set it down, and stepped out of frame. It was pristine, the kind of clean that stands out, as if the dust in the air refused to settle on it. Ellis was drawn in, breath catching slightly. He reached for it, slid it on. Later he'd tell a buddy it felt like armor, like sliding into something meant to protect and project. He said he walked out of that shop feeling 10 years younger, 5 inches taller, 2 steps ahead of the world. The shop owner swore it wasn't theirs. He hadn't seen it that morning. He didn't even remember ringing it up. Ellis walked out with a nod, whistling something low under his breath. That was a Tuesday. By Friday, he was different. Not crazy, not violent, just sharp, focused, like a man with purpose. He started going for long walks at night, wearing the hat even in the dark, told people it helped him think. He started saying things like, "Men these days don't carry themselves right, and there's a kind of strength that only lives in silence." A week later, his landlord noticed all the mirrors in his apartment were turned to face the wall. The only thing always facing forward. The hat. It's always like that. The hat doesn't stay. It moves, slips away like a whisper in an empty room. One moment it's yours, the next it's waiting for someone new. You might pass it tomorrow, might catch sight of it in the window of a thrift store you weren't planning to visit, might brush past it in a box marked free. You'll think, that's a nice hat, and it will be. Just your size, just your style, just in time. Chapter 2. The man who wore it first. Before the whispers. Before the disappearances. Before the hat began showing up in pawn shops and flea markets and back seats of locked cars. There was one man. Albert Henry Cassell. Born in 1888. Died, if we're being generous, in 1927. No obituary. No confirmed remains. Just a line in a municipal ledger marking him presumed deceased. Cassell was the kind of man whose name got whispered in clubs and scratched into matchbook covers. A man whose shadow walked into a room a beat before he did. The kind of man other men tried to copy and failed. Suited sharp. Shoes shined to a mirror. And always, always that charcoal black hat. People described him in contrasts. Cold smile, warm voice. Soft-spoken but impossible to ignore. Eyes like polished steel. A handshake that lingered, made you feel like he'd weighed you in that brief grip and found you lacking. He was neither politician nor preacher, but carried himself like both. He ran with jazz musicians, spoke like a professor, moved like a dancer. He belonged to no world, yet slid into all of them with uncanny ease. And he never, ever removed the hat. Every known photograph of him, dozens, perhaps hundreds, shows it, perched perfectly on his head. Always the same hat. Not a different one styled the same way. The same exact hat. Witnesses said it never shifted, never got knocked off, never even tilted. It sat like a crown on a king who didn't need to be told he ruled. The first stories appear in New Orleans, circa 1909. Cassell was said to be playing saxophone in a riverside bar on Decatur Street, though no one could recall seeing him audition. He didn't seem to know the other musicians. Didn't seem to need to. They fell into rhythm behind him as though they'd practiced for years. The tune was slow, swampy, strange. Something that made your thoughts slow down and drift sideways. He never drank, but he always ordered a drink. Sometimes water, sometimes a glass filled with melting ice and nothing else. Bartenders found it unnerving. Patrons said they'd glance away for a moment and find the glass full again. A few people noticed that the laughter in the bar stopped when he played. The conversation dulled, time slowed, and then the disappearances began. Men. Always men. The kind who moved easily through back doors and alleyways. Busboys, stagehands, a pianist, a police informant, even a rival musician or two. No blood, no struggle, just absence. And in each case, the last person they were seen speaking to, Albert Henry Cassell. He was questioned once. A Baton Rouge detective named Roland Sheffield came down with a file thick enough to make trouble. He was smart, ambitious, cocky. He interviewed Cassell for 30 minutes in a quiet hotel room above the club. Sheffield took notes the whole time. The last entry in his notebook, scrawled and jagged, reads, "Smile too calm. Hat never moves. There's something wrong with the air around him, like it holds its breath." The next morning, Sheffield's car was found idling at the edge of the bayou, driver's side door wide open. Notebook on the passenger seat, gun missing, shoes wet. He was never found. Cassell kept playing. By 1922, he had relocated to Chicago. The clubs were bigger, the nights colder, but he stayed the same. People in the scene started calling him the Quiet Hat. No one remembered who coined it, but it stuck. There's a diary entry from a stagehand at the Velvet Ribbon Club, dated February 3rd, 1924. He played for hours. Same song. No breaks. No one asked for it. No one stopped him. I unplugged the speaker. It still played. I swear on my life. He looked at me, and my hands started shaking. He didn't say a word, just kept going. I sat back down like nothing had happened, woke up the next morning with nosebleeds and no memory of getting home. The music wasn't music anymore. It was a rhythm, a pulse. It didn't entertain, it occupied. The hat began to gain attention, quietly. Journalists would try to photograph it and find the negatives warped. Artists tried to sketch Cassell and found themselves unable to capture the hat's angle quite right. One said it made his wrist cramp every time he tried. Another vanished halfway through the sketch. Then came the incident with the club manager. He tried to fire Cassell after a brawl broke out over the bar tab. The manager went out the back door into the snow. His coat was found, his shoes neatly placed, but no footprints led away. Cassell played the next night. Same time, same rhythm. When the club shuttered in 1926, he didn't protest. He simply vanished, gone, like mist under sunrise. And 3 months later, the hat resurfaced. A man named Leo Martinez bought it off a sidewalk vendor in the Loop. He didn't need a hat, but said he couldn't stop looking at it. Bought it for $1. The vendor didn't speak, just handed it over and stepped back into the crowd. Martinez wore it to a party. Guests said he seemed different, looser, eyes brighter, quieter. He started quoting poetry no one had heard, talked about history he hadn't studied. 2 weeks later, neighbors reported screaming. Police broke into his apartment to find him seated, hands folded on a clean table. The hat sat in his lap. He was calm. In the next room, a phonograph played the same voice loop again and again. He showed me how to be better, stronger. I understand now. I just had to listen. It was Martinez's voice. He never spoke again. Was institutionalized. The hat vanished from the evidence locker the night it was booked. A night shift officer reported a headache and an urge to lie down. When he awoke, the locker was open, the tape from the camera blank. From there, it continued, and the name Cassell stopped being spoken. Because the hat no longer needed a name, it had become one. Some say Cassell was the first to awaken whatever lives in the band and brim and stitching of that thing. Others say he didn't awaken it. He created it. that the charm, the presence, the disappearances, that was the price. That he poured himself into it like a mold. That the hat is what remains of him now. So when you see it, perfect, still, patient, don't think you're the first. And don't fool yourself into believing it's just an accessory. It's an inheritance. And if it fits too well, too easily, you've already been chosen. Just like Cassell was, and just like him, you won't take it off. Not until it's done with you. Chapter 3. A perfect fit. You never question it at first. You find the hat, maybe in a pawn shop, maybe tucked behind a box of cassette tapes at a garage sale, and something just clicks. The weight of it. The way the brim settles around your brow like it's known the shape of your head longer than you have. You slide it on. You check the mirror. And for the first time in a long time, you don't second-guess your own reflection. You don't fix your collar. You don't adjust your posture. You just stand there and think, there I am. That's the thing about the hat. It doesn't just fit your head. It fits your doubt, smooths it out, buffs it away until what's left is clean, polished, convincing. You walk out into the world taller, not just physically, but in the space you take up. People move aside. Conversations pause. A half-second longer when you speak. Doors open a beat sooner. You don't notice it all at once, but it's there. A man named Thomas Griggs found the hat at a yard sale in Raleigh, North Charlie. It was late summer, hot, humid. He was looking for a lawn chair. What he found was a hat laid carefully on a weathered bench, not part of any display. He asked how much. The old man at the table looked confused. "That ain't ours," he said. "Must have blown in." But there was no wind that day. Thomas tried it on. He said later that it was like something exhaled inside his skull. Like a pressure he didn't know he'd been holding finally released. He felt composed, complete. He didn't haggle, just dropped a 5 on the table and walked away. Within a week, people noticed a difference. He stood straighter, spoke slower, told better stories. A friend said it was like watching someone come back from a long illness, except no one knew he'd been sick. Thomas was a middle school gym teacher, average guy, wore polos and khakis, kept to himself. But after the hat, he started wearing suits, pressed, dark. He stopped shaving, but somehow looked sharper. He had a way of making you feel seen, heard, even when he wasn't looking at you. His students started calling him Coach Cass. He didn't correct them. One evening, a co-worker saw him standing under a flickering street lamp after school. Just standing. Still. The hat perfectly in place. She called out to him. He didn't answer. Didn't even blink. She said his mouth was moving, but no sound came out. The next day, he handed in his resignation. No explanation, just a firm handshake and the words, "It's time." The last anyone saw of him, he was boarding a southbound bus with nothing but a suitcase and the hat. It was raining. But he didn't bring an umbrella, didn't need to. The rain didn't touch him. There's another story. A man named Curtis Vale lived in a studio apartment above a shoe repair shop in Detroit. Found the hat in a laundromat, sitting in the middle of a folding table, like someone had forgotten it. But no one in the building owned it. Curtis was an insomniac. Quiet. Kept journals filled with scrawled ideas for inventions he never had the money to build. Wore glasses thick enough to stop a bullet. People called him harmless. After the hat, he changed. Didn't talk more, but said less with more weight. He stopped taking the bus. Started walking miles across town, saying he liked the way the city felt at night. When he did speak, it was in clipped, old-fashioned phrases. "Mighty kind of you," or "I reckon so." A woman at the bakery down the block said she heard him humming a tune under his breath while browsing muffins. The tune had no melody, just a rhythm, slow, unsettling. Eventually, Curtis stopped being seen altogether. But the journals? They kept coming, slipped under neighbors' doors, pages covered in diagrams of hat racks shaped like spinal cords, poems about silence as a living thing, blueprints for machines with no clear function. Always signed CV for C for him. The building superintendent found his apartment empty a month later, not cleaned out, just empty. The windows were shut. The lock wasn't broken, but the walls, they had handprints. Dozens, all facing inward. What everyone says, what they always say, is the same. It fit too well, not just the size, the feeling, the precision of it. Like it had been waiting for them, like the hat didn't belong to them, it had always belonged on them. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it doesn't look for the strongest, or the smartest, or the boldest. Maybe it looks for men who are just cracked enough, men who want more control, more weight, more presence. And maybe the hat gives it to them, for a while, until the fit stops feeling like confidence and starts feeling like something else, something tighter, something with teeth. But by then, it's too late. You won't take it off. Not because you can't, because you don't want to. Because taking it off would mean losing whatever piece of yourself the hat revealed. That boldness, that voice, that version of you who didn't care what others thought, who could walk into a room and silence it with a glance. It's addicting, and that's the curse. It doesn't come for you with fire or chains or shrieking shadows. It flatters you, tells you you're special, tells you it was always meant for you, that you're finally the man you were supposed to be, and you believe it. Because it fits, not nightmares, not exactly, more like memories, being in a room lined with velvet curtains, holding something heavy in gloved hands. Jazz playing faintly from the other room. A name spoken in a voice he didn't recognize, but somehow felt like his own. In the dreams, he always wore the hat. Always. And always, someone else was afraid of him, another man. Gordon Haley began sketching in his sleep. His wife would wake to find pages of drawings scattered around their bedroom floor. Sketches of old clubs, of women in flapper dresses, of hat stands lined up like gallows. He drew faces he couldn't name, all staring directly forward. When asked, Gordon couldn't explain them. He said he'd never drawn before. He'd worked in finance, had never touched charcoal. One drawing showed the hat from a dozen angles. But no matter how you turn the page, the shadow always fell in the same direction. The thoughts get more insistent. That's what they all say. They stop asking permission. At first, it's just a suggestion. Maybe walk the long way home. Maybe try carrying that knife again. Not for anything in particular, just in case. But then it escalates. The thoughts feel warm, familiar. You don't question where they came from. They sound like you now. They've been practicing. They know your voice, and you start trusting them. That's how it gets in. Not through horror, not through violence, through confidence, through the growing belief that this version of you, the one that thinks these things, is the real one. A man named Calvin Merritt lived alone above a bookstore in Massachusetts. He was a poet, mild-mannered, friendly, if quiet. After he found the hat, he started writing differently. Shorter lines, sharper words. He once read a piece at a local open mic. The poem was a single sentence repeated 10 times. The throat is a door. When asked to explain, he smiled. Some doors want to be opened. A week later, a patron at the bookstore reported seeing Calvin standing in the philosophy aisle, hat perfectly centered, not moving, eyes open, not blinking. Just mouthing something again and again. The words were, "He said, I could." No one saw him again after that. The bookstore's owner found a copy of Beyond Good and Evil, torn neatly in half and placed on the counter like a receipt. And beneath it, scrawled in pencil, "Keep it warm." That's what it does. The hat doesn't take over all at once. It waits, coaxes, plants ideas like seeds and lets you water them. And when they grow, when those thoughts bloom and twist and take root in your bones, you no longer remember where you started and where it began. because the thoughts aren't yours. But they sound so good, don't they? So clear, so easy. And all you had to do was wear it at 4003 a.m. every day without fail. And then it deepens. You begin checking locks 3 times instead of once, rearranging your silverware by sharpness, folding your laundry in exact stacks of 3. You hum the same untraceable tune under your breath, always the same tempo, always the same number of notes. No one tells you to do it, but it feels right. A man named Everett Braddock was one of the first to be studied, a behavioral analyst who used to lecture on subconscious decision loops. He found the hat at a silent auction. No tag, no donor name. He outbid no one. Everett was methodical by nature, clinical. But within weeks of wearing the hat, his colleagues noted oddities. He began his lectures with the phrase, "Time folds best in silence." He started underlining every 3rd word in his textbooks. He logged his dreams meticulously. Only the dates, never the contents. His journals were eventually found after his disappearance. Inside were dozens of charts, lines connecting dates, times, phrases. One chart mapped local construction sites against historical crime scenes, but the connections made no sense to anyone else. In the center of the largest diagram, a perfect sketch of the hat, not stylized, not exaggerated, just real. Everett had labeled it axis of return. The phrase means nothing. Or maybe it means everything. Patterns start to define the life of the wearer. Men who once slept in miss appointments, lose track of hours. Suddenly they are punctual, regimented, focused. They wake, they walk, they write, always in multiples of 3, always with the hat. It isn't obsession, it's structure. A structure gifted, not imposed. And they love it. A truck driver in Nevada wore it for a month before developing a nightly ritual. Every evening, he'd drive to an abandoned diner on Route 56, park facing the highway, and wait exactly 41 minutes. Then he'd light a cigarette, leave it burning in the ashtray, and drive away without speaking. He did this for 27 nights. On the 28th, he brought a journal. It contained only one phrase, repeated 27 times. We are preparing the route. He was never seen again. Others develop habits that veer closer to violence. One man, a retired school principal, began collecting knives. Not displaying them, just organizing them. Grouped by blade type. Sorted by grip texture. He didn't cook. He didn't hunt. But by the time he was found, he had 108 blades in his basement, arranged in spirals like flower petals. He said the pattern calmed him. He also kept a set of blindfolds beside the knives. Not for use, he claimed. Just in case someone else needed to see. Another man, Arthur Dell, an accountant in Tennessee, began taking nightly walks through a graveyard 2 towns over. Always the same path, always the same order of headstones. He never looked at the names. He said the shapes were what mattered. Said they felt familiar. He was last seen walking past the caretaker's shed just before midnight. His shoes were found neatly placed at the cemetery gates. The hat was gone. And then there are the men who begin to write. Not stories, not poems, instructions. One man left behind a stack of napkins, each one detailing how to prepare a single-room apartment for the reception. Another wrote diagrams of locks, strange interwoven systems that require 6 separate keys turned in perfect unison. He labeled it containment in case of reversal. Another, an architect, submitted blueprints to the City Planning Commission for a library that had no doors, only mirrors. Each mirror was labeled exit. The patterns evolve. They move from daily habits to deeper rituals. And soon, the men are no longer following them, they're making them, passing them along, leaving breadcrumbs not for themselves, but for the next one. That's the worst part. The realization that these patterns don't serve the wearer. They serve the hat. They prepare the ground. They ensure the vessel stays clean. A man named Felix Crane was a security guard. Night shift. Worked alone. He found the hat on the locker room bench one evening. No one claimed it. Wore it that night, then the next, then every shift after. He started placing sticky notes around the building. They were always in the same places. Under desks, behind picture frames, inside ceiling tiles. They had no words, just arrows, always pointing down. By the time he vanished, there were 47 of them. No one knows what they pointed to. No one really wants to. Because those who start asking, start mapping the lines, following the arrows, decoding the patterns, well, they start seeing the hat everywhere. In windows, on mannequins, reflected in puddles where no one stood. That's how it replicates, not through theft, not through inheritance, through repetition. Men follow the patterns, and the patterns lead to the hat. And the hat leads to whatever waits just behind the mirror of your thoughts. There's a theory that these patterns aren't random at all, that collectively, across towns and cities and years, the rituals form something larger, a grid, a map, or worse, a spell, something stretching its arms across time through the actions of the men it chooses, a performance with no applause, just continuity. One man theorized, the hat isn't merely cursed, it's a conductor, and all the men who wear it, their instruments, plucked and tuned and played until their purpose is complete. If that's true, then every pattern, the circles, the notes, the knife arrangements, they aren't signs of madness. They're sheet music. And someone's been listening. So if you find yourself waking at the same time every night, if you start hearing the same phrase over and over in songs, in conversation, in your own mind, if you begin arranging your tools in a circle without knowing why, take off your hat, check your reflection, and pray it blinks after you do. Chapter 6. The first incident. It always comes sooner than expected. Up until then, everything feels manageable. The hat is strange, yes. The patterns, the thoughts, the growing pull towards shadowy routines. It's odd, but not alarming. You feel more in control than ever. You feel like a better version of yourself. That's why the first incident always catches you off guard. It's never dramatic. It's never loud. It slips in like fog, like water under a door. You're alone. You blink, and something's changed. Ask any man who wore the hat long enough, and if he's still around, he might tell you about the moment he stopped trusting himself. For James Ellison, it was the missing hour. A small-town barber in Indiana, James was known for his steady hands and quiet laugh. He wore the hat every day after finding it at a rummage sale. Said it made him feel more grounded. Clients liked it. Said he looked more professional. But one Thursday afternoon, a woman named Carla Willis came in for a trim. She sat down at 3:15 p.m. When she stood up, it was 4:02. James hadn't spoken a word the entire time. The haircut was perfect. Precise. Too precise. Carla couldn't remember anything between sitting and standing. Neither could James.
He said the clock skipped.
But the camera in his shop, an old security system he never bothered to turn off, recorded the entire thing. The footage showed James cutting hair as if in a trance, unblinking, unsmiling. Occasionally mouthing something, though no sound could be made out. At one point, he placed a hand on Carla's shoulder for several full minutes without moving. She didn't flinch. When he removed his hand, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. James burned the tape that night, but something lingered. He began hearing a faint tone whenever he walked into his shop. Not a noise, exactly, more like a pressure in his ears. He thought it was tinnitus. Went to a doctor. The hearing test came back normal. A few days later, a boy went missing 3 blocks away. A teenager, last seen walking his dog. James didn't know the boy, but when the search team passed by the barbershop, James felt something settle in his chest. A slow, cold certainty that made his stomach twist. He went into the bathroom, took off the hat, and vomited. He tried to throw it away that night, drove 10 miles out of town and left it in a roadside trash bin. The next morning, it was waiting on the coat rack in his shop, still spotless, still his size, still warm. Other incidents followed a similar rhythm. A man in Portland, Oregon, found himself in his neighbor's basement with no memory of how he got there. He had a meat thermometer in one hand, and his other palm was inked with a name he didn't recognize, written in perfect rock letters. Backwards. The neighbor had been out of town for 2 weeks. The basement lights were on, and there was a faint smell of oil and matches. The man never wore the hat again, but it didn't matter. It was already inside him. A UPS driver in Arizona was caught on dashcam parking his vehicle at an abandoned service station. He stepped out of the truck and stood in the same position for 38 minutes. Didn't move. Didn't blink. When questioned, he insisted he had made all his deliveries, claimed the footage must have been edited. He was fired. 2 weeks later, the same truck with a different driver was reported missing. Found 4 towns away. Empty. Hat on the dash. And in the passenger seat, a note that simply read, "You delivered me." In every case, the man doesn't feel like he did anything wrong. That's what unnerves them most. There's no guilt, no memory. Just a blank space and a terrible calm that follows it. You don't remember doing anything, but you know something happened. Something that changed you. They say the hat doesn't just whisper thoughts. It takes notes, learns how you think, what you need, what you'd be willing to give up for just a little more silence, a little more control. And then it tests you. The first incident is the trial run. See how far it can reach before you notice. See how much it can pull from you without resistance. It doesn't care if the action is small. It cares if you'll question it. Most don't. They move on, go back to their routines, tell themselves it was just fatigue, just a blackout, just nothing, until the second incident. And by then, the doubt is already gone. A man named Hector Alvarez, a former detective, recorded a message for himself after his first incident. Left it on a cassette recorder beside his bed. It was shaky. Quiet. Barely audible beneath the hiss of static. Don't trust what you remember. Don't trust the hat. You'll think it's helping. You'll think it's you. But it's not. It's not. It's... The tape ends there, mid-sentence. The recorder was found melted. Not burned. Melted. The plastic warped, but nothing around it was damaged. His journal was left open to a page that read, "We passed the first rehearsal." That phrase turns up again and again in incident reports. The first rehearsal. As if what happened wasn't the main event, just a practice run, just warming up. Another man in Ohio called a friend in tears at 2:13 a.m., said he couldn't remember where he'd been the past 2 nights. Said he'd woken up with mud on his hands and sand under his tongue. The friend told him to calm down, to go back to bed, to take the hat off. He did. So if you ever find yourself somewhere you don't remember going, if someone tells you a story about something you did, and your mind returns nothing but silence, if you wake to find dirt beneath your nails or bruises on your knees or handwriting on your wall that you didn't put there, ask yourself, was that the first time? Or just the first time you noticed? Chapter 7, it never stays thrown away. The first time you try to get rid of it, you'll feel clever. You'll drive somewhere far, somewhere dark. You'll bury it in the woods, toss it in a dumpster behind a 24-hour diner. Maybe you'll light a match and watch it burn, or think you did. You'll feel that pulse of relief, a strange emptiness that almost resembles peace. You'll tell yourself it's over, and then you'll find it again, waiting. Always clean, always just where it wants to be. For Mark Jensen, it showed up on the passenger seat of his car. He'd thrown it into the river the night before, weighted it with stones, watched it sink into the black water and stood there until his feet went numb. By morning, it was resting on his seatbelt buckle. Not wet. Not even damp. He got in the car anyway. He put it on. Because by then, he knew. The hat doesn't go away. It returns. But more than that, it punishes you for trying. One man, an art teacher in Stay Pool, tried to shred it. He fed it through a heavy-duty industrial shredder at his school. Watched the ribbons split and curl and vanish between the blades. The next morning, he woke to find all of his jackets, scarves, and ties sliced into perfect 1-inch strips and laid in a circle around his bed. The hat was on his pillow, immaculate. He took 2 weeks off work. When he returned, he never spoke of it again. Another man, Lyle Carver, a former firefighter, set the hat ablaze in a steel drum, watched the flames roar high. He stood outside until it was ash. That night, his smoke alarm wouldn't stop going off. No smoke, no heat, just the sound, louder, higher, until the ceiling unit cracked and fell onto his bed, sparking but never burning. And beneath it, nestled in the cotton sheets, the hat. No soot, no scorch marks. Lyle moved 3 states away within the week. It followed him. There's a theory that the hat is not just an object, but a tether, a kind of living bookmark, tying itself into your life the moment you wear it. You become a page in its story, and it refuses to turn back. You don't discard it. You can't. You can only delay it. It is patient. It is persistent. It does not forget. One man mailed it to himself, boxed it up in thick cardboard, sealed it with reinforced tape, addressed it to a PO box 400 miles away. Watched the mailman take it, checked the tracking number, watched it move across the map. When he got home that night, it was on his bed. No box, no tape. Just waiting. He checked the tracking again. It still said, in transit. There's even a story from a retired mortician. He claimed to have buried the hat with a body tucked under the hands of a man who died without family, without belongings. The hat would go with him, disappear beneath the dirt and decay. 3 days later, the body was exhumed due to a clerical error. No hat. Just a slip of paper in the suit's inner pocket. Scrawled in handwriting no one recognized, "Don't send it back." The hat reappeared on the mortician's coat rack that evening. It was upside down, like it was watching, or waiting to be picked up again. It's not just the return, it's the escalation. Some men report waking to find it resting on their chest, perfectly centered, the ribbon brushing their chin. Others swear they've seen it move in the corner of their vision. A tilt here, a shift there. One man caught it halfway down his hallway. He'd locked it in a drawer hours earlier. There was no sign of forced entry. He moved the drawer to the attic, then sealed the attic door with nails and cork. The next night, he found the hat in his freezer, pressed flat between 2 frozen pizzas. Another man tried throwing it into a canyon, hiked 2 miles, made sure no one was around, watched it vanish into the abyss. He stood there for an hour, then turned to head back. And there it was, sitting on the hood of his car, still pristine, still just his size. The refusal to stay gone is what breaks most men, not the thoughts, not even the actions. It's the realization that no matter how desperate you become, how clever, how thorough, it's already made its decision. You wore it. You're part of it now. Even the ones who try to ignore it. Lock it in a safe, seal it in concrete, mail it overseas, end up hearing from it, in dreams, in static, in patterns of footsteps that don't match anyone else in the house. It's not just returning, it's reminding. You don't get to forget. You don't get to be done. One of the most chilling cases is from a man who moved to a remote cabin in the Rockies. No phone, no internet, no electricity. He left the hat in a city locker, took nothing with him but food and firewood. 6 months passed. He kept a journal. The final entry, dated March 3rd, reads, "I heard a knock at the door. No one should be able to find me here. No sign of forced entry, no prints, just the journal on the floor, and the hat hanging by the fireplace. Others have tried burying it in salt, wrapping it in copper wire, reading Latin phrases and burning sage. Nothing works. The rituals aren't for the hat. They're for the wearer, to make them feel like they still have control. But control is a memory. The moment you put it on, the script was already written. So if you ever think you've lost it, destroyed it, escaped it, check your coat rack, look in your passenger seat, and ask yourself, did you really throw it away? Or did it just let you think you did? Chapter 8. The Collector. He's not a myth. Not a ghost story whispered between the lines of police reports and second-hand tales. He's real. The Collector. No one knows his name, or if he even has one anymore. Some say he used to wear the hat himself, but found a way to resist it. Others say he was never chosen, just obsessed. That he tracks its movement across states and decades, not to destroy it, but to understand it, to catalogue it. Because he doesn't just follow the hat, he follows all of them. Every cursed object, every dark talisman, every mirror that reflects the wrong moment in time, every coin that returns after being spent, every doll whose eyes shift in moonlight. But the hat? The hat is the one that got away. The one that keeps moving, never staying long enough for him to catch it. But he tries. He keeps records, boxes of them, maps littered with pins, strings, and Polaroids, faded receipts, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes passed under doors and left inside bathroom stalls, all pointing to one thing, a trail. The earliest confirmed sighting of the Collector was in 1981, in a town outside Baton Rouge. A man walked into a used bookstore at closing time, carrying a metal briefcase and wearing gloves despite the summer heat. He bought nothing, said nothing. But after he left, the owner found the briefcase on the floor, its lid slightly ajar. Inside were dozens of photographs, men in hats. Some were candid, some surveillance style. One showed a man standing in the middle of a cornfield, arms stretched like a scarecrow. Another showed a man standing ankle-deep in a creek at midnight, smiling. On the back of each photo, a location and a time. No names, and at the very bottom of the case, sealed in plastic, a single page torn from a journal. It read, "They don't remember wearing it, but it remembers them." He moves from town to town, never staying longer than a week. Motels, train stations, back roads. If you ask around the right places, old diners, used clothing stores, antique shops, you might get a nod. A murmur. Tall guy, long coat. Talks to himself. He carries a map unlike any other. It isn't made of paper. It's layers of plastic and twine. Symbols only he understands. Dots that glow under black light. Traces of where the hat has been, where it might be going. Cities marked not by names, but by dates and events. July 17th, Stillwater, 3 missing. November 2nd, Akron, 1 returned, speaking Latin. There are red strings for wearers who vanished, blue ones for those who survived, and black strings for those who wore it too long and became something else. He speaks in fragments, uses coded language when interviewed, if he even agrees. One paranormal researcher claims to have recorded him in 1998. The audio is warped, full of static, but one sentence is clear. The hat isn't hunting, it's building. He believes it's not acting alone, that the hat is part of a larger mechanism, that each wearer, each incident, each obsession and disappearance feeds a system, a pattern. And the Collector? He's trying to trace the shape it makes. He's been spotted collecting samples. Grass from the field where a man was last seen, ash from a fire that wouldn't spread, a single nail from a boarded window that no one claimed to have hammered shut. His briefcase contains dozens of glass vials labeled in a looping script. Wichita, breath. Toledo, sleep print. Denver, inverted silence. What does it mean? No one knows. But in 2007, a man claiming to be a former assistant said the Collector keeps a journal written backward. The first page begins, "We don't wear the hat, we hold the weight of it." And on the final page, it's not a thing, it's a place. He rarely intervenes. That's the part most find unsettling. He observes, records. In one case, he followed a man for 11 days, never speaking. The man finally confronted him outside a laundromat, screaming at him to stop. The collector said only, "Don't fold it." Then he disappeared. The man disappeared 2 days later. His apartment was empty. Except for a note taped to the mirror, I folded it. Some believe the collector's notes form a larger message, that he's trying to warn us. Others think he's gone mad, that he's not preserving stories but feeding them, that the more he writes, the stronger the hat becomes. But here's what we know. He's seen the hat more than once. In 1993, he allegedly found it in a motel room in Nebraska. He didn't wear it. He wrapped it in cloth, placed it in a box, and drove it across state lines to a lake near Salt Lake City. He didn't burn it, didn't bury it, just stood at the edge of the water and whispered something for 10 minutes, then left the box by the shoreline. The next morning, the box was empty. He left a mark on the tree behind it, a symbol no one's been able to translate. But here's the thing. Ever since that day, the hat's movements have gotten faster, shorter stops, more aggressive returns, less time between incidents. As if something were accelerating, as if the hat had heard him. And whatever he said, it made it hungry. Today, the collector moves constantly. He leaves coded notes for others to find, train tickets with words scratched into the margins, receipts with coordinates and phrases like "stand facing east" or "mirror at midnight." Some people follow these clues. Some return changed. One woman received a postcard with no return address. On the front, a picture of a field with a lone figure wearing a hat. On the back, "You're next. Watch the shadows." She burned the card. 2 nights later, her hallway mirror cracked, and the hat was there, not in her home, but in the reflection. So what is he really collecting? Evidence? Patterns? Or something else? Some believe he's not trying to stop the hat at all. They think he's mapping a way in, that one day he plans to wear it, not by accident, by choice, to see where it leads. Because the hat isn't just a curse, it's a doorway. And the collector? He's holding the key. Chapter 9. The hospital files. They call them the returned. Not survivors, because survival suggests recovery, and none of them ever recover. Not victims either, because to be a victim, something must happen to you. The men catalogued in the hospital files, the ones who wore the hat and didn't vanish, they didn't have something happen to them. They changed. Or rather, something was changed in them. Some quiet rewiring. The hat didn't kill them. It kept them. In wards across the country, there are rooms, always windowless, always unlisted, where these men reside. Technically, they're patients, but everyone who's seen them calls them something else. Hollow. It's never the same story, but it's always the same shape. They arrive disoriented, sometimes after wandering into police stations barefoot, or found curled in the corner of an abandoned building. Some are discovered in the middle of the road, hat still on, muttering numbers or humming that slow, unplaceable melody. Others are dropped off left on the steps of ERS or county hospitals by someone who never gives a name. They don't answer questions. Not at first. Then, slowly, they begin to speak. But the words never match the person. One man, a former park ranger, spoke exclusively in reverse Latin. Another, a math teacher from Ohio, recited train schedules from cities he'd never visited. One patient could only say the phrase, "She let me wear it," over and over, in 7 distinct accents. Doctors try to explain it. Trauma, dissociation, perhaps a rare form of schizophrenia triggered by environmental stress. But none of the diagnoses hold. Because every time someone tries to help them, tries to draw them back to reality, something strange happens. The lights flicker, the temperature drops, and the hat shows up. Not physically, not always, but in drawings, in dreams, in the notes left behind by staff. One nurse, Angela Brody, worked the psych unit at Steve Mary's Memorial in Missouri. She was there the night a new patient was admitted, Male, mid-30s, unshaven and wearing a tailored coat that looked like it belonged to another century. He had no id, no name, just a hat. Angela logged the intake notes. His pupils were dilated, skin cool to the touch, pulse slow but steady. He didn't resist when they took the hat, just smiled and whispered, "I won't need it again until she's here." When she asked who she was, he smiled wider. Angela didn't sleep for 3 days after that. 2 nights later, she found the hat outside her car. She never took it home. She didn't even touch it. But she started seeing it in the periphery, on hooks in the hallway, on mannequins in store windows, reflected in puddles. When she tried to file a formal complaint, the file disappeared. Her ID badge stopped working. Her key code was reset. 3 weeks later, she resigned, moved across the country. Last anyone heard, she was working in a lighthouse on the Oregon coast, refusing to come to the mainland. The hospital filed her case as voluntary relocation due to occupational stress. There's an entire drawer in the archives labeled non-compliant staff responses. It's filled with reports of nurses refusing to enter certain rooms, janitors quitting mid-shift, security guards resigning after single encounters. Some of the files are stained watermarked in a way that doesn't match any spill or leak. Others are warped, as if they were left near heat but never charred. Then there's the audio. Some hospitals record therapy sessions. Many of the returned were placed under observation, studied by neurologists and psychologists alike. In one recording, the interviewer asks a patient, "What do you remember from before?" There's a long pause, then a whisper, "He let me borrow the rhythm." Another session ends with the patient suddenly turning toward the microphone and saying, "We've been recording you the whole time." The therapist filed for early retirement a month later. He now refuses to speak in rooms with mirrors. One file, known only as 47B, details a patient found in a gas station restroom in Nevada. He had carved symbols into his arms, not letters, not images, just deep, clean grooves in repeating geometric shapes. When asked why, he simply replied, "I wanted to remember the structure." His arms healed without scarring. No one knows how. When photographed, the wounds reappear. There are hundreds of files like this. Men who hum songs no one knows. Men who wake up screaming in voices not their own. Men who stare into corners for hours, whispering words that dissolve when recorded. One man patient, 119, in a facility outside Denver, refused to speak for months. Then, one morning, he began reciting The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot in perfect rhythm. After the final line, he laughed, said, "I finally understand the water." He collapsed moments later. No heartbeat, no brain activity. 12 hours later, he sat up, asked for tea, and never spoke again. Facilities that house the returned develop reputations. Strange things happen. Clocks freezing, windows fogging from the inside, staff forgetting entire hours. Phones ring with no one on the line. Visitors report hearing footsteps behind them in empty corridors. In one hospital, staff began finding Polaroids slipped under office doors. Pictures of themselves, but not quite. In the photos, they wore hats, the same hat. When asked about it, they all claimed the same thing: "I don't remember taking this." The most dangerous cases are those who do remember. A handful of men retained fragments, names, places, patterns. But the more they shared, the worse their condition became. One man drew maps, spirals and corridors with arrows pointing inward, said they were paths to the conductor. Another wrote a list of names, most unrecognizable, except for one, Albert Henry Cassell. When a staff member circled that name and asked the patient about it, he smiled. Good. That means he's almost finished tuning. That staff member vanished on his drive home. His car was found at the edge of a lake, hat on the dash. So what do we do with these men? They're not violent, not directly. They don't scream or lash out. They're calm, peaceful. They hum, they whisper, they draw. And yet, everyone who enters their rooms leaves changed, not always noticeably. But eventually, they start dreaming of hallways they've never walked, of hats turning slowly in mid-air, of music without sound. The hospital files are not officially shared. They've been leaked, smuggled, recopied in pieces. Some believe the collector had access to them. Others think he wrote some of them himself. But one thing is clear. These men didn't survive. They were shelved. Held in place like pins on a map. Preserved. For what? Some think the hat is storing them, that each one is a backup, a vessel. That if the hat is ever destroyed, if that's even possible, it will simply return to one of these men. Reignite whatever it left inside. Because the hat doesn't leave empty-handed. It takes something, a thought, a name, a voice, and it gives something in return, a rhythm, a purpose, a waiting. And in the rooms where the returned wait, the clocks tick just a little too slow. The shadows fall at the wrong angles. And if you sit quietly long enough, you might hear it too. Not a whisper, not a voice, but the sound of fabric sliding into place. Chapter 10. When it picks you, it never feels like a choice. Not at first. You'll say it found you by accident, sitting there in a second-hand store, draped over the corner of a chair, or hanging on a hook that didn't exist the last time you walked by. Or maybe it came in the mail, addressed to no one, the return label smudged into illegibility. Some say they inherited it from an uncle they barely remember. Others swear it just appeared on their doorstep, on the kitchen counter, on the passenger seat of a locked car. But deep down, you know, it wasn't random. It picked you. You felt it before you ever touched it. A hum in the spine. A flutter beneath the ribs. A sudden stillness in the world, like a breath held just a moment too long. And then the thought, not spoken, not even formed, but understood, this is yours. It doesn't always start the same way. For some, it's a sudden confidence. For others, a sense of belonging like you've been wandering your whole life and only now found your home. But the moment you place it on your head, something locks into place and something else quietly slips out. You'll smile, maybe chuckle, think, fits perfectly. You might even look around expecting someone to notice, but they won't, not yet. That part comes later. Ask enough wearers, those who lasted long enough to speak, and they'll tell you the same thing. It didn't feel like being chosen. It felt like being recognized. A man named Elliot Harrow was the kind of person no one ever remembered. Middle-aged, balding, worked in a toll booth, kept receipts for everything. Lived alone in a rented apartment with beige carpets and beige curtains and beige silence. He found the hat in a laundromat, just sitting there, on top of a dryer with an out-of-order sign taped to the front. No one else in the room, no sound except the buzz of overhead lights. He put it on. 2 days later, he quit his job, started wearing suits, spoke slower, walked like he had somewhere important to be. Neighbors began calling him Sir, without knowing why. He started keeping notebooks. Not diaries, not journals. Records. He began tracking the movements of crows, cataloguing the patterns of sidewalk cracks, measuring the time it took for streetlights to flicker once the sun dipped below the skyline. His handwriting improved, became sharp, angular, clean. One entry, dated 3 weeks after he found the hat, reads, "The beat is in the bones. The rhythm waits for nothing. I was not asked. I was summoned." That same week, he began carving strange sigils into his walls using the back end of a spoon. He vanished on the 31st of October. Apartment was found spotless. Hat was gone. The word listening was etched into every mirror. Another case, a jazz pianist named Marcus Bell reported hearing the hat before he saw it. Said he heard a 3-note melody during a sound check, one no one else on stage could identify. Followed it backstage. Found the hat on top of an amplifier. He wore it during his set that night. He didn't remember playing, but the audience cried. Not because it was beautiful, because it was true. That's how the hat chooses you, not because you're powerful, not because you're lost, because you're ready. And once it decides, you don't say no. A man named Grant Fellows, an entomologist in Montana, claimed he never put it on. He said it brushed his shoulder once as he passed a coat rack at a gas station. He collapsed on the floor, convulsing. When he woke, he had no memory of the week prior. But his journals from those 7 days were full. Drawings of spirals made of ants. Diagrams of hat brims intersecting with lunar phases. A final note. She's closer now. His wife left him 3 days later, saying he smelled like thunder. He went missing the following spring. The hat never forces itself. It offers. It arrives when your defenses are down, when your will is tired and your direction blurred. It looks like clarity, feels like purpose. It flatters you in the most intimate voice. You're not like the others, and you believe it. Because who doesn't want to feel seen? One man, a philosophy professor in Vermont, spent years researching cursed objects. He wrote papers, lectured, dismissed the hat as a myth until one night it arrived in the mail, wrapped in newspaper dated 3 years in the future. He called it an anomaly. He wore it 2 days later. His lectures changed, more poetic, less structured. He started speaking in parables, always ending with the phrase, "and so it walks again." Eventually, he stopped grading papers, said they were already written. He was last seen walking into a lake, shoes in hand. The students who witnessed it said he never sank. He just vanished beneath the reflection. Some believe the hat doesn't just choose individuals, it curates them, shapes them across lifetimes, as if the version of you it once already existed, and it's simply calling that self forward, burning away all that's unnecessary. There's a theory that the hat only calls to those who've worn it before, in another life. That its selection is actually recognition, that the men who wear it aren't chosen, they're reclaimed. This theory is supported by certain wearers speaking in languages long dead, or knowing details about architecture or astronomy they never studied. One man, a mail carrier in Missouri, found the hat in a bin labeled "Lost and Found" behind the post office. After he wore it, he began writing letters, hundreds of them. No envelopes, no stamps, just folded pages left in alleyways, slipped into cracks in sidewalks, wedged between bricks. Each letter began with, "I remember you. Do you remember me?" The letters contain names of people who didn't exist, addresses that mapped to abandoned places, and references to things that haven't happened yet. But then, slowly, those things did. A fire in Pennsylvania, a blackout in Tallahassee, a voice heard on an empty radio frequency. The hat doesn't just pick you, it prepares you. Each man is a rehearsal, a test, a chord in an unfinished song. By the time you realize you've been chosen, it's already too late. You'll find yourself changing your routines. Eating at odd times, walking instead of driving, saying yes to things you would have refused. Your dreams become landscapes instead of stories. You wake with sand in your shoes or water in your lungs or a name you don't recognize written on your hand, and always, always the hat is there, waiting. Silent, not watching, but listening. It doesn't care what you were, only what you're becoming. And becoming is the part that hurts the least. What comes after, that's when the song truly begins. Chapter 11, the disappearances, they never scream. That's what people always say. Not the family members, not the friends. Those who vanish without warning, pulled from their lives like threads from cloth. It's the ones who saw them go. Co-workers, neighbors, bystanders. People who were there the moment someone just left. They all say the same thing, no sound, no struggle, just a stillness, then absence, like they stepped out of frame. And the ones who vanish, they're always men, always quiet, always recently changed. Sometimes there's a pattern, sometimes a trail, but mostly there's only silence. And the hat, sometimes found, sometimes missing, sometimes still warm. Take the case of Jeremiah Locke, 34, warehouse worker, lived alone in the upstairs apartment of a grocery store. By all accounts, he was ordinary, friendly, punctual, private. One day, he came to work wearing a hat, dark, clean, perfect fit. Said it was a gift from a cousin, though no one ever met the cousin. Over the next 3 weeks, his behavior shifted. He started walking to work instead of driving. Began writing in notebooks he never showed anyone. Started humming. A low, slow tune, almost like a funeral march. Then, one morning, he didn't clock in. His time card was still there. His lunch was in the fridge. Security footage showed him arriving, unlocking the back door, stepping inside, and never leaving. No one saw him again. They searched the entire building. Basement. Rooftop. Nothing. Except the break room, where his uniform was folded on the table, and the hat rested on top of it, upside down, like a bowl waiting to be filled. Jeremiah's disappearance was ruled unexplained. His apartment was emptied, the footage archived. But weeks later, a janitor found a message scratched into the inside of Locker 7. The measure of absence is rhythm. Another case, across the country, Victor Mendez, a piano tuner from Fresno, known for his quiet charm and fastidious routines. After acquiring the hat found on a train station bench, he began keeping unusual hours. Clients reported him showing up in the middle of the night, tuning instruments no one had asked to be fixed. One night, he was caught on a baby monitor, in someone's living room, sitting at an invisible piano, fingers twitching in the air. By the time they ran downstairs, he was gone, but the baby was laughing, and the hat was resting in the crib. These disappearances are never violent, never messy. They're quiet. Men leave mid-sentence, step around corners and never return, cross thresholds that seem to fold around them. And always, there's a kind of static in the air, a pressure, a hum. Some people say you can smell it, a faint scent of dust and ozone. One witness said it was like breathing in old music. Another claimed it smelled like thunder just before a storm. There was a case in Pennsylvania where 5 men went missing within a month, all within the same 4-block radius. Each had reportedly acted strange in the weeks prior. Each had purchased an old hat from the same antique shop. When the police investigated, the shop was closed, no record of ownership. The building had been empty for over 3 years. They found the hats, though, 5 of them, identical, each resting on its own shelf, each facing the same direction. The building was demolished 6 weeks later. And the hats? They weren't listed in the inventory. But shortly after, hats matching their description began appearing in thrift stores across neighboring towns. People try to explain these vanishings with logic. Abduction, escapism, mental breaks. But the details never fit. No footprints, no luggage, no financial transactions. Just empty rooms. And the absence of sound. There's one case that haunts investigators the most. A man named Joseph Klein, software engineer, amateur photographer, found the hat at a flea market. After wearing it for 2 months, he became obsessed with light. He blacked out his apartment, painted the windows and filled it with candles, said he could hear the flicker. Neighbors heard him talking to someone, always late at night, always starting with the same phrase, "I know you're here now." One night, they heard nothing, just silence. Police were called for a welfare check. What they found was disturbing. Candles still lit, food still warm on the stove, but Joseph was gone. The only thing out of place? His camera, set up on a tripod, pointed at the center of the room. The last photo showed nothing, just a flicker of motion, and in the lower corner the edge of the hat, resting on the floor, and a single word scratched into the lens, enough. Some believe the hat is feeding something, that each disappearance is a tithe, a gift, a rhythm being completed. Others believe the men aren't gone. They simply moved somewhere else. Not dead, not alive, just shifted, changed, One woman, whose husband vanished after wearing the hat for 6 days, claims she still hears him. In the vents, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the ticking of clocks. She's certain he's in the house, just not in the same way. Disappearance doesn't mean absence, not entirely. Sometimes the hat is found after, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it reappears halfway across the country in another man's closet, and the cycle starts again. There are patterns in these vanishings, times of day, phrases repeated, objects left behind, always something ordinary. A cup of coffee half drunk, shoes untied, doors ajar, and always a kind of peace. The men don't run, they walk, they smile. They leave the world like it was never theirs to begin with. And maybe, in the end, it wasn't. The disappearances are not just endings, they're transitions. Steps into whatever comes next. The hat doesn't kill, it calls. And some men answer, not with words, with silence, with stillness, with the simple act of not returning. Because whatever the hat shows them, it's enough to make them leave everything behind, even themselves. Chapter 12. The hat is still out there. Some stories end. They wind down, run dry, burn out. They find a last page, a final scene, a point of quiet closure. But this story, the one with the black hat and the men it chooses, doesn't stop. It waits. And if you've made it this far, maybe you already knew that. Because even now, the sightings continue. Not just in old towns and forgotten corners. Not just in antique stores or burned-out buildings, but here, now, in broad daylight, in cities, on trains, in checkout lines. A man in a dark hat staring too long, walking without sound, smiling at nothing, and always the hat. Immaculate, unforgettable, too clean for where it's been, too real to be coincidence. The most recent documented case comes from a parking garage in Austin, Texas. Security footage shows a man entering at 9:43 p.m., no car, just walking. He's wearing a long coat, dark shoes, and a hat. The next hour of footage is distorted, glitches, freezes, static. When the camera clears at 10:51, the man is gone. But on every windshield in the garage there's a single index card. Each one reads, "It still fits." The local police blamed it on vandals, but the parking garage closed 3 weeks later after reports of echoes and invisible footsteps became too frequent to ignore. No one has claimed the footage. No one wants to. Across the country, similar stories appear. Sometimes in forums, sometimes in whispers. A man finds a hat at a bus stop in Chicago, puts it on, and starts calling himself by a different name. A barista in Portland receives a tip written not on a bill, but on a receipt from a diner that burned down 10 years earlier. A commuter in London hears a hum from an empty train car. Steps in. The doors close. He's gone when they reopen, left behind on the seat, a hat. The collector, if he's still alive, has gone underground. His maps have stopped appearing, but others have taken up the thread. Independent researchers, paranormal podcasters, lost family members. One group, known only as the Fold Keepers, claims to have compiled over 200 confirmed hat sightings in the last decade. They use terms like frequency spill, resonance bleed, and imprint paths. They say the hat doesn't travel through space. It travels through attention. The more people hear about it, the closer it gets. That's why you'll never find a news article about it. Why the police never issue alerts. Why no one seems to remember more than a few details after an encounter. It wants to stay on the edges. It needs the room to move. And when it finds someone ready, someone fractured just enough to let it in, it shows itself. Not all at once, just a glimpse, in a store window, in the shadow under a streetlight, in the reflection of a mirror when you know you're alone. There's a tale, maybe apocryphal, maybe not, of a podcaster who spent 6 months chasing the hat, interviewed witnesses, visited sites, compiled data. He disappeared in November. His final audio recording is only 4 minutes long. It ends with the sound of footsteps and a whisper. "You're telling it now." The file was found queued in his laptop under a folder named Return. If you've been keeping track, you've seen the patterns, the wearers, the changes, the vanishings. The hat doesn't move aimlessly. It loops. It remembers. Some say there's more than one. That when the original owner, whoever he was taken, the hat split, fractured, multiplied. Now there are copies, all identical, all flawless, all capable of the same influence, but others argue the opposite, that there is still only one, and every time it appears, it's not another hat. It's the same hat, changed, older, wiser, closer. And if that's true, then maybe the question isn't where the hat is now. Maybe the question is, who's already wearing it? Because here's the part we never told you. You don't need to touch it to be chosen. You don't need to see it to be found. The rhythm works backwards. First, you hear about it. Then, you remember it. Then, it remembers you. You'll start feeling it soon, if you haven't already. The sense that something is watching. The urge to walk the long way home. The need to check the back seat of your car twice. You'll see things out of place. A shoe turned the wrong direction. A mirror fogged from the inside. A hat in the distance. Not close. Not yet. But waiting. So what now? Now that you've read this? Now that you've let the story in? The hat doesn't come for just anyone. It chooses carefully. But you made it to the end. And it likes finishers. So the next time you see a hat, maybe in a window or resting on a bench or balanced on a coat rack, ask yourself, did I see it before it saw me? Or has it always been there, waiting, watching, and listening? Because some stories don't end. They just wait for someone new to tell them. And you just told yours. If this story still echoes in you, if something feels just slightly out of place tonight, take a moment to let that silence stretch. The story may have ended, but its echo walks with you now. If you felt something stir while listening, give this tale a gentle like and subscribe if you'd like to walk further down this path with me. And in the comments, tell me what stayed with you, not what frightened you, but what followed. Sometimes that's the only way we know we've been marked.